Welcome back to Vote 2024 with me Sil. Toman. Now joining me now in the studio is Muslim entrepreneur Zia Yusuf, who co-founded the luxury concierge brand, Velocity Black, and then you sold it last year, I believe, for £233 million. You've made a large donation to reform and you had backed the Conservatives, but now you're backing Nigel Farage's party. So I suppose the obvious question first of all, Zur, if you don't mind me calling you that, is why?
Yeah, so just to be clear, I was a Tory voter and a Tory member. I've never donated to any political parties before. Look, the simple answer for why I've done what I've done is, first and foremost, I'm British. I'm incredibly proud to be British. I owe so much to this country, and I feel very strongly that British values are actually the reason why so many people want to come here. Britain has welcomed millions of immigrants of all races, of all faiths. Over the years and welcome them wholeheartedly. The reality is that I don't enough people making a full-throated, wholehearted celebration and protection of British values. I think that's really important. And by the way, those British values are things like freedom of religion, freedom of speech, love of country, equality. Before the law, innocence, the presumption of innocence, these are actually incredibly rare things, historically, and things I think Britain should be really rather proud of. So
I mean, the Conservative Party would argue that they do protect those freedoms.
Look, my issue with the Conservative Party is simply that they are so divided. So if we just look at them now going to the election, I think it's an objective statement. They are so divided that I simply don't see how that they can govern effectively.
And I suppose if we look at your kind of life story or CV on paper, the son of migrant parents who came here, and then you're born in this country, or indeed in Scotland, I believe. You're educated at private school, you then become an investment banker at Goldman Sachs. On paper, especially as a man of color, you would probably be seen to have more in common with Rishi Sunak than Nigel Farage.
Well, look, in terms of my own personal history, my parents came here 40-odd years ago. They came here with nothing really to their name other than a newly minted medical degree. They have since both between them given almost half a century, in fact more than half a century, of service to our NHS. So again, nobody knows or feels more strongly than I do about the contribution that immigrants can make and have made to this country. And by the way, I got a 50% scholarship to go to that private school. And both my parents had to work 2 jobs to get there. And so, for example, if there were VAT payable on those fees, I simply wouldn't have been able to go. It would have stretched my parents too far. So I'm incredibly grateful for all of those opportunities. And look, I think right now we as a country have to play the ball where it is on the youth field. And I think that this is an incredibly challenging time. Having co-founded and run a business, I know how vital it is that to stare really challenging problems in the face and make difficult decisions, have difficult conversations, and do that in a timely fashion. If you fail to do those things, if you have a credit card debt and you simply don't open the mail and hope the whole thing goes away, that doesn't help at some point. Those chickens come home to roost. And if you look at you in the mid-1980s, when my parents came to this country, net migration into the country was around 50,000 people. That is a manageable number. It doesn't place enormous undue stress on public services, and it also allows those new arrivals such as my parents to assimilate comfortably. That number last year was 650,000. Yes, so this is a conversation again about British values. Which can be adhered to and are adhered to by the way of people of all races and all faith. That's really important. You know, this idea that when we talk about British values, only a certain race can subscribe to those values. I think it's totally incorrect. I hope that people can see that and proof that that's not the case. And by the way, that is, I believe, how the vast majority of immigrants in this country are. They patriots and they care deeply about this country.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because this idea that immigrants themselves might be worried about more immigration is something that probably isn't explored thoroughly enough. We witnessed this during the Brexit campaign. I remember going up to Grandam Margaret Thatcher's old seat and speaking to Polish people who are worried about an influx of Romanians. In your case, is immigration or the lack of control of immigration by the Conservatives over the last 14 years. The main motivating factor for you to switching to reform.
It's one of several motivating factors. I do think it's a vitally important issue. If we cannot even secure our borders, we spent more than £50 billion on defense last year, and we cannot secure our borders, and we're an island. This is unacceptable. And if a party has been in power for 14 years, look, I actually think Richie Shack does actually believe what he's saying sincerely. I actually do believe that, but I'm sorry, we have to judge them. On their track record, because they've been in power for 14 years, and actually to solve this problem, I do think it takes a lot of courage. I think it takes boldness, it takes decisiveness. Frankly, it also takes a unified party who are going to support him. And you know, the other point on that about immigration is you create a perverse incentive structure. You know, I don't think these nuanced conversations are had enough, as you say. So if you have come here as a legal migrant, and we can have a separate conversation about the numbers there, but the reality is, we've come here legally, you've played by the rules, you've jumped through on the hoops to do it, and then you see people who cross the channel illegally from France and they get treated exactly the same way. You create a perverse, and you paid for visas thousands of pounds and £1,000, and again, if you've contributed to the British taxes, and you pay taxes all your life. Again, regardless of your race, your religion, too often these conversations are boiled down into these oversimplifications. I think people feel a deep sense of injustice there, and actually a sense of fair play is one of those British values I'm talking about.
Just briefly, Z, because we're running out of time, as is ever the case was always on this show. Because we have to cram in so much into an hour. There has been some criticism of Nigel Farage and indeed reform candidates' rhetoric around Muslims. What's your response to that criticism?
Well, look, I think Nigel Farage, if you look at what he actually says and not the projections that people put on what he says, I sincerely believe this is my opinion, and I've historically been a reasonably good judge of character, which is why I've had some success in business, for example, is that he wants what is best for British people, regardless of their faith or regardless of their race. That is my sincere view. You know, with regards to the candidates, look clearly. Candidates have made some appalling remarks, which I think we can all condemn those remarks. Let's not forget reform is a startup. Reform is an 100-year-old party, and they had to stand up 650 candidates in like 2 weeks. As someone again who started a business myself, you know how difficult that, I know how hard that is, and you can't maintain quality 100% when you do it. I actually think despite the fact that it's worrying Mark and Nigel has by the way repudiated. Those I actually think they've done a pretty good job overall of standing up those candidates, and as I said, reform as a startup, they're going to grow as a political force.
Can I be so bold and rude as to ask you how much money you've given reform?
No, it was meaningful. It's in the hundreds of thousands of pounds, and that's that is testament to how important this is and how strongly I feel about it.
Alright, you're lovely to meet you. Thanks for watching this video.